Hi guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Neil here, and today we're going to discuss a topic that can give a lot of guitarists a huge headache, and it's given me a hell of a lot of headaches over the years. We're going to talk about string gauges, and particularly string gauges in drop tuning, because that's when things get slightly complicated. Okay guys, so before we get started, I just want to say that today's video is sponsored by Stringjoy Strings. Okay, I made a video about string gauges many years ago, but my preferences have changed a bit, and so has buying strings. Now, just a quick one about Stringjoy. I'm not going to go on about them too much, but the reason I like them is because they do 0.5 gauges, okay, which is going to be relevant within the video. I've got a little sticky note here to make sure that I get everything bang on and right in the video and don't miss anything, which I don't usually do. I want this video to be as precise as I possibly can. Now, for some people, going up a full gauge, say between a 9 and a 10, is too much. A 10 can become hard to bend and too stiff, particularly if you have weak or small hands. And for me, a 9.5 has been, a 0.5 gauge string has been a bit of a revelation for me. And I don't know how many string brands do it, but Stringjoy do, and that was one thing that pulled me in towards them. The other thing was that with Stringjoy, you can get your own custom sets. So say if you play in drop C and you have whatever string brand you are using right now, and you really like the tension on, say, the G string, you can learn from that. And then when you order some Stringjoy strings, when you order a set, you can, if that stays in your mind, you can order that particular string and mix up your own set. If you're in drop tuning and play metal, then that is really crucial, and you guys will understand that, because sometimes you can buy a fixed set of strings out there and you think you've got everything bang on, but one string might just be a bit too slack or a bit too tight. You can tweak that with Stringjoy. You can even put on a 0.5 gauge. Right, moving on. Huge thanks to Stringjoy for sending me out some strings. I keep a pack of Stringjoy strings up there in the background all the time, so you guys know exactly what I use. We're going to start with drop tuning, and when I'm talking today in this video, I'm referring to guitars like this, which are my main type of guitar. It's a Floyd Rose equipped guitar that is a 25.5-inch scale. Things change, guys, with different bridges, particularly if you have a fixed bridge like a hardtail or a stop-tail style bridge, and things massively change, obviously, when we're talking about scale length as well. So if, say, you have a guitar that is a stop-tail bridge or a hardtail bridge, and it's a shorter scale, say a 24.75-inch scale, something like that, then things are going to change drastically, because one, the scale length has changed, and also you've changed the way the tension works on the strings. So we're going to stick with Floyd equipped guitars and 25.5-inch scale guitars today. So here's my little sticky note to guide me through this, so I don't get anything wrong for you guys. So over the years, my preference has changed. I'm going to start with drop C. Okay, now drop C is not C standard, first of all. Drop C means that your guitar is tuned to D all the way down, apart from your low E, your thickest string, that will be tuned down to C, okay? So that is where, when you go and buy a set of strings, they might be designed for C standard. If you get them on, then you're going to end up with an extra floppy string on the top, which is what happens when you get a regular guitar. If you get a new guitar and you want to tune it to drop D, you drop the 42 gauge down, which probably comes as standard, and that 42 on the low E, when it goes down to D, is too loose. It works, but it's pretty loose and doesn't sound great. So we want to get rid of that problem, and this is where choosing sets by Stringjoy really comes in handy, because you can choose which string exactly you want in which position, which string gauge, okay? So for drop C, I go 5611 on a Floyd equipped guitar, 25.5-inch scale. There's a guitar behind me, hopefully it's behind me, here. This King V here, I've played in drop C on that guitar many moons ago, and I've had a 5210 on. It worked, it felt good. That was my live guitar, so when you're stood up playing live, I don't think you have as much power and attack in your playing, and also string bends and getting up high and things, it's all harder work when you're stood up. So I think that's why I got on with that gauge a bit better. Then in the end, I ended up changing to a 5410 gauge on that guitar, which I think that is what is on it right now. I don't play that guitar that much anymore, but it does work, a 5410. But for me, 5611 is a lot better tone-wise, particularly if you record as well with that guitar. I have a Schecter over here. This was one of the first guitars that I tried that gauge on, 5611, and it's worked. And now in drop C, if I have any guitars in drop C with a Floyd 25.5 inch scale, that's the gauge for me. I'm not saying that's the gauge for everyone. You know, it's personal preferences, this, and that's the problem, and that is what the massive headache is. But I receive so many messages. I reckon I get at least 3 messages per week regarding string gauges, and it reignites my own headache, which is why I thought I'd make this video. So yeah, drop C, 5611, start there, see what you think. It has, for some people that'll be too light, you know. It has kind of a standard feel to it when you're playing it. Obviously the strings are thicker and bigger, so it doesn't feel like standard, but the actual tension has a similar feel to a standard tuned guitar. Next we're going to move to drop D. Now here's where things get a bit complicated for me. So when you buy a guitar from a store, most guitars that are tuned to E standard are 42.9. Okay, that's your typical 9 gauge, is 9 to 42. For drop D, I like to go 46.9. Okay, so I've got, when I'm soloing and playing up higher standard, feel up high, but when I go down to the D, the low D, I haven't got a baggy string that's flapping all over with poor tone and poor tension, you know, because when you're doing fast staccato picking, you know, on your riffs, you need it to be a pretty tight string. If it's baggy, it slows you down and gets tied up, and you can't bounce off the string properly or accurately. So that's what that's all about. Now, the funny thing is that since working with Stringjoy Strings, I've noticed that on, say, a 46.9 gauge, my high E, it's harder to pitch because it's slightly too slack. But when I've put, say, a 46.10 gauge on, I've noticed that the 10 is too much hard work. There's a lot of fight there with the Floyd. Obviously when you bend, the Floyd comes up and you're having to push it harder and harder, and that's kind of the different feel between a Floyd equipped guitar or any guitar with a trem on and a guitar that's hardtail. So for me, a 46 to 9.5 is a really good gauge, and like I said, Stringjoy do half gauges, 0.5 gauges, so that's where I think Stringjoy are really cool. And yeah, for drop D, I would definitely go 46 to 9 or 46 to 9.5. To be fair, if you're recording, you could even go 48 to 9 or to 9.5. That would probably be even better. It depends on what you want it to feel like, you know, in terms of how close you want it to feel to standard tuning. A 48 might be a bit too tight for some people if they're bending, you know, on their riffs and sending harmonics out on the low D. So that's drop D for you. 46.9 to 9 is what I would recommend gauge-wise, but 46 to 9.5, if you're going to use Stringjoy Strings, is even better. Drop B tuning, guys. Now, this is where, when you start getting this low, especially with a Floyd, this is where things get a bit complicated. And if you're going to go out and buy a straight set of strings, most string brands do a 60 to 12 gauge, and that is what a lot of people that want a standard feeling guitar end up with. But for me, if you can get a 62 on there, then that would be even better. So 62-12 is probably my personal preference. Also, if you have a Floyd locking nut, I often find that most locking nuts are okay without having to get a new screw around that 62 area, because obviously as you're getting a thicker string on there, you're taking threads off the screw, and you're running out of room to tighten the nut. So for me, most are okay at 60 for sure. To keep it safe. Some are okay at 62. Any more than that, when you start hitting 64s and things, I think you need to start thinking about making some adjustments to the actual nut. You know, so you've got more threads on there because the strings are getting much thicker. But for me, you can get away with a 60 to 12 gauge in drop B. Now, a 62 gauge is better, but there's not many brands that do a 62-12 that I've known. However, Stringjoy, you can just put order a normal 60 to 12 set of strings and replace the 60 on there when you order it with a 62 by using the custom string gauge selection. on their site, which I think is really cool. So next we're going to move to D standard. Now this is a tuning that's really awesome, and a lot of people who hear tunes that are in D standard often think that they're actually tuned a lot lower, maybe to C, when they're actually not, they are D. Now for D standard, I think 4810 is great for standard feel. So if you think of a 42.9 in E standard, I think that a 4810 works really well in D standard if you want that same feel. If you want it a bit tighter, then you're probably going to have to go, you know, to a 5011 or a 5211, something like that. But for me personally, a 4810 feels pretty nice. Next and finally, the last one is C standard. Now this one I've put down as 5612. I don't use this tuning very much. In fact, at the moment, I've not got a guitar in this tuning. But 5612 makes sense to me because the 56 is around right for a C, a low C string for your riffs and everything. And obviously, when you use the drop B tuning, you're using 12 gauges. Some would argue that you need a 13 there. A 13 would work. But for me, if you're a bender and a vibrato guy, not many are, I guess. You know, when you start getting to low tunings, the shred and the solos and stuff get less and less, don't they? You'll probably argue that point with me, but I always think that, you know, if you go back to the new metal era when all these low tunings came about, I do think that guitar solos started dying a bit, to be honest, and vibratos and string bends weren't as important as they used to be. But yeah, I'd go C standard 5612. You could probably get away with a 5613, or even maybe, you know, I know guys that play a 60 set, a 6012 in C standard, but for me, I think that would be a bit too tight. And with a Floyd, you start. The problem with the Floyd is that when you tune too low and use big fat mama strings, that you start getting problems with the Floyd, and it becomes harder work. The more tension, I always think you start running into problems with your springs and noise and tension. So yeah, for me, C standard 5612. So that's another video, guys. I hope this helped you guys out, because I get these questions all the time. Just remember, this is personal preference, and also it's really important not to forget that my personal preference over the last, what was it? So the last video I think I did was 2013, 2014. So in like just over 10 years, my preference for string gauges has changed. And maybe that's due to sitting down, like I say, maybe not, I don't know. But some people would consider my string gauges light. I get it all the time, but I'm aiming for that standard feel, so I'm comfortable. You know, I've got a lot of, I've been playing a long time. Is that a ghost? I've been playing a long time, and I go to the gym a lot, and I've got a lot of hand niggles that I don't particularly want to get any worse, because I don't want to get into a point where I have to stop playing when I'm old. You know, I want to play all my life, you know, until I die, basically. So yeah, if I can save my knuckles and fingers from any extra pains, then I will do that. And playing with a standard feel guitar, you know, it feels pretty nice and pretty easy. Your tone gets bigger. You know, the bigger the string you put on, the thicker the string you can handle. Your tone will be bigger and more solid, and your tension will be better. However, if you're not comfortable and you're struggling, there's absolutely no point, because you're not going to enjoy guitar playing. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I've been Neil, and I'm getting the hell out of here. I really hope this video helps you. Please don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up, and leave me a comment below about what string gauges you guys use, because it's always interesting for other people who have watched this video and are unsure about my gauges to have a look at what other people are using as well in these tunings that I've mentioned. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all soon.